Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a review of White Lotus Season 3, directed by and written by Mike White. So, with a Season 4 greenlit by the studios for Mike White to have try his hand again at another series, my question would be why, and is Mike White running out of steam? In the other two series, you had slower moments and slower episodes, but things still developed within the characters. In this season, there was about 2 to 3 episodes in the middle where nothing happened narratively for the characters at all, other than Saxton and Lachlan having a weird incestuous storyline, which was not needed, in my opinion. A bit of a weird one, that one. I know Mike White can sometimes be sexually, deprived or sexually weird and freaky with his characters, but to do like an incest story, I just don't know why. I think at that point it's like for the wow factor rather than the fact this would actually happen for these characters. And just as quickly as it came, it disappeared with no explanation other than them, the brothers being awkward and maybe disliking each other after this holiday from where they started, and Lachlan then wanting to run away to Thailand himself, maybe to get away from the weird awkwardness that he was feeling with his own brother. But apart from that, in those 2 to 3 episodes, nothing else really happened. The girls went on like a trip with Valentine and had a little party and, didn't really like each other from the fallout of Jocelyn sleeping with Valentine, which Laurie wasn't happy with. The Ratliff family literally did nothing, as I say, other than it literally focused on Saxton and Lachlan in a boat. And Chelsea and Rick's storyline didn't really go anywhere either. Neither did Mook or Gatok. Their storylines didn't go anywhere either, nor did Belinda with Greg. So that was a weird thing to have like 2 to 3 episodes where really nothing happened. They were weird parts, as I say, I've mentioned before, but also with Rick and Frank, when Frank was going on about like, oh, he was in a like depressive pit and he's having sex every day and he was having sex with Asian women and he wanted to be an Asian woman himself, and then he got, he had sex with men, where he was being the Asian woman and feeling like he was the Asian woman and getting an Asian woman in the room so he could look at the Asian woman and pretend he was the Asian woman and connect with her in his eyes when he was having sex with those men. And he said that became like a every night thing, multiple times a night thing. Apart from that whole monologue in one of those episodes, I mean, that was funny. It was so weird. Again, Mike White being his most sexually weird. But apart from the fact that I laughed at Frank very harsh and hard, then I don't think nothing really happened in those few episodes. Overall, I think this was again another good season for Mike White, and I can see why season 4 is going to be greenlit. Although I hope in that season more happens throughout each episode to make us want to come back. Because a few episodes, as I say, there nothing seemed to happen, and I was like, I'm still enjoying it. It's still. There's the idea of prestige TV, and the White Lotus fits into this category. And prestige TV is when it's like a golden age of TV, and TV shows have a lot of depth and the characters have a lot of depth, and it's shot really cinematically, which is what this White Lotus TV series fits in. Other examples are like Succession, The Sopranos, stuff like that, where you feel like you're almost watching a movie rather than a TV show. That's prestige TV, which Mike White does find himself in. So whilst I had a few problems with the series, I still enjoyed each and every episode that we got. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our returning characters, those being Natasha Rothwell, who plays Belinda, and John Grease as Greg Hunt. Well, we can't not mention the fact that both of these were in season 1, Belinda and Greg, and then Greg was in season 2, where he infamously, I think he set up Tanya's death to where she was killed by the gays. I'm not sure if Greg is gay himself or is bi and part of the gay group. It was a long time since I watched season 2 and the details are sort of fuzzy now, but from what I remember, I think Greg had a hand in setting up Tanya's death. Belinda is, she arrives in Thailand to start her new journey from Hawaii to Thailand, and she wants to explore a different version of being a massage therapist and being in that industry. And what she does there is meet Pornchai, who is the person who will help her through her journey here. And I think she's meant to be staying for a couple of months initially. That's when she says she's meant to be staying for. She, of course, only stays for 7 days because of the events that unfold with the other guests. Whilst there, though, she does bump into Greg, and she realises that she knows him and then puts 2 and 2 together, and then her journey is sort of fearing Greg and what Greg will do and wanting to leave Thailand now that she knows Greg's there, because she does a little research on Google and sees that Tanya dies, and the police want to question Greg, but he's left the country. And Lord behold, Belinda finds Greg in Thailand. But as for Greg himself, he just wants a peaceful life. So I think that does admit some guilt in the fact he did kill Tanya to take her wealthy money, because I think she was worth 500 million when she did die, and he took that money. So he's taken that money and gone off and run off to Thailand, and is now got his new girlfriend Chloe. We'll talk about her later. Here, though, Belinda and Greg sort of circle each other the whole season until Zion, which is Belinda's son, comes in, and he kind of encourages her to play ball with Greg, who offered her, I think, 100,000 to have of hush money, and when she refuses that, because she has morals, Zion, who has less morals, goes, man, we can shake him up for more. And then there's a funny scene with it in this business meeting in Greg's house, and he's playing hardball, Zion, and he's like, oh, you know what, I think we've crunched all the numbers and it's going to be like 5 million. And then Belinda practically spits out a whiskey, and she's like, I did not agree to this. And then she seems really awkward and stands up, and then it's sort of a ploy herself as a double ploy, because she's like, go close the deal. And then Greg does wire over 5 million, making Belinda rich, and she's able now to start the business she's always wanted to. But I don't think it will be in Thailand, and not with Porn Chai either. Poor Porn Chai. And there's also a full circle moment here with Porn Chai and Belinda, how Belinda says, yeah, I just don't want to commit to anything now that she's rich. And she's like, and I don't want to overpromise things, and I just want to, she's like, circumstances have come up in my life, so I can't really do a business with you anymore. Just as much as Tanya did to her in the first season, when Tanya said, yeah, I don't think I can commit, and I don't think I can set up a business with you. All right, then, moving on, we'll go and talk about the three women of this three friendship group, which is the famous Jacqueline, who is played by Michelle Monaghan, and she brings along her two friends, Kate and Laurie, who are Carrie Coon and Leslie Bibb. Here, the three of them start off as these nice little friends. They're all reuniting, they have busy lives, and quickly throughout the series you see the cracks. Kate goes off with Laurie and talks, some smack about Jacqueline, and Jacqueline does the same with Kate separately, and separately with Laurie, and they all kind of like, oh, Kate's a Trump supporter now, and Laurie's so sad, and she just seems really lost in life, and oh, Jacqueline's so snooty and stuck up because she's famous. These are all the small little conversations they're having without the other third person present, which was quite interesting and fun to watch, and it's just so true to, I think, how friends are if you're in a 3 or 4. People do talk some smack about each other, jealousies in life and whatnot, so that felt really natural to see, and it was enjoyable to watch because it was quite funny. Where they kind of go off the rails is when they get invited to go out with Valentine, and he puts them in this old retirement home, and I don't know if that was a joke on his part to be like, oh yeah, you're old women, so you can go off to a retirement home and that's going to be a good night for you. And then Jacqueline's like, excuse me, we're young and fun and we want to go off and party, so then he takes them off to Thailand and to a club that's hip and cool, and they end up partying, and Jacqueline has this whole weird thing where she's just really insecure about being old and dancing with Valentine and his friends Alexei and Vlad, although Vlad's not the best one. It's Alexei and Valentine who are the good-looking ones that all three of them are after. Well, I say all three, Kate isn't because she's happily married, but Laurie and Jacqueline, who is in a relationship herself, want to go after these younger boys. Or men. So that's all that happens, like I say, in that episode where nothing really happens except from everybody parties. And it ends up with Jacqueline and Valentine sleeping together, which annoys Laurie. And then Laurie goes off and sleeps with Alexei and runs out of his window because she gets caught by Alexei's actual girlfriend. And then I think at the end, Laurie has this epiphany, and Carrie Coon does a great monologue towards the end where she's like, they're at the final dinner party together, and they're saying how much fun they've had. Kate and Jacqueline are like, this has been such a great holiday, and Laurie's like, even though she's been arguing with them throughout, she's like, actually no, I've been really sad and not like this holiday. But she had the epiphany that whilst her love life is not very good, or her working professional life isn't very good, she has her two friends, and what more can she want? So she says she loves them, and they end off on a nice happy note. I think these were interesting characters for Mike White to explore. I think he could have explored a bit more. I think sometimes when they were on screen, I think he could have gone further with them to really bring up the tension more between them. But I guess not everybody needs to be in dramatic tension, but I think that they could have had a little bit more to do other than party and fall out, because that's pretty much all they did. Okay, moving on to Walton Goggins and Amy Lou Wood, who play Rick and Chelsea this season. This is a spoiler. Yeah, so spoilers are within this review. I should have said at the beginning, my bad. It's a spoiler review, so expect things to be spoiled from here on out. So we got Rick and Chelsea, our doomed and fated lovers, who eventually bite the dust. But we'll talk about that towards the end. I have a section on the ending and the murders and everything, but here I'll just talk about Rick and Chelsea. These were very typical of... Oh, what's that? Go away. Thank you. These were very typical of Mike White's characters, Rick and Chelsea, these arguing lovers. And it's through no fault of Chelsea that they're arguing, because everything seems to be on Rick. And it's very interesting here that Mike White explores an argumentative couple with an age dynamic, because Chelsea looks to be about 20 years younger than Rick. Now, I had in my own personal life a relationship where the person I was with was 20 years older than me, so I completely understand Chelsea and still don't understand Rick. Because I never understood the person I was with, really, who was 20 years older than me. But I understand their dynamic all too well. So when I was watching this, I was like, God, I feel so sorry for Chelsea. She just needs to leave Rick and not be with Rick and lust after Rick, because the life that she, I think, envisions with Rick is one that is never going to be given to her. And on that note, Rick is horrible to Chelsea throughout the series, shows her no love and affection constantly, and Chelsea is still like his number one bandwagon. And she gets sidelined with Chloe and Saxton and Lachlan, especially on the boat party, to be bad and cheat on Rick. But Chelsea stays true to herself and true to what she believes is a good relationship and doesn't cheat on Rick. Meanwhile, Rick is off with Frank in some hotel doing drugs with loads of naked women everywhere. And potentially, I think that he probably might have done something, but then he won't tell Chelsea anyway, because that's the type of man he is. Unfortunate character who's grown up in an unfortunate way, blaming Jim, who is Sritala's husband, and Sritala is the one who owns the White Lotus in Thailand. And Rick is gone there not to take Chelsea on a nice holiday, but to get vengeance for his dad. Now, for all Mike White does that is good, I feel like this narrative was completely obvious, because it was pretty obvious from the get-go that this guy could possibly be his dad. And when we even get to the scene where he's with the guy and he's talking to Jim in the room, when he pushes Jim off the chair, when Frank is pretending to be a Hollywood director, in that moment, Jim, I think, and this is maybe credit to the actor or not credit to the actor, plays it so familial and so regretful, but also annoyed that, you know, Rick is his son and has shown up to annoy him and bother him. It's too obvious between the two actors there that they are each other's father and son. And then when you figure that bit out, you sort of put together Rick is going to be the shooter in the end of the season, because he comes back from Bangkok and he's like, I'm healed, I'm really positive now, I faced my demons, I've got over what has been bothering me all season, and I'm back with Chelsea, and Chelsea's hugging him and she's really happy that he's back, and they're all happy-dappy. But when Sritala and Jim come back to the White Lotus that they own, after the fact that Rick had gone there and pushed Jim over in his chair in his own home, he sort of just tells Rick, he sees him at the breakfast buffet table on the last day, and he's like, get the F out of here, like, you don't come to my house and assault me and, you know, raise my wife's hopes and then let her down and then stay at my hotel. So he's like, go. And Rick's like, oh yeah, I'm leaving on the first boat. And they sort of part ways again. And again, there is like a moment where it's like, why don't you just tell him that he's your son, so that any death that is going to happen, and at this point you kind of figure out it's going to be Rick doing some shooting, you just kind of be like, yeah, tell him he's your son. I think Chelsea was a little bit doomed, really, though, from the start to the end, and I feel sad that she was doomed at the end with Rick, and because of Rick, and that's not very good. Poor Chelsea. But you know what was nice about Chelsea? She wasn't like Tanya, was so sad and it was heart-wrenching sometimes to watch Tanya, because you felt like she needed the happy ending because she was so depressed and so sad and so lost. Chelsea has a little bit of Tanya in her where she is a bit lost and a bit sad, but she's a glass half full, and because of her spiritualism, she pulls herself through to be half full, where Rick is the complete opposite. And somebody online I saw made a really interesting comparison where Chelsea and Rick are yin and yang, and boy, they end up in the yin and yang position, and I'll talk about that towards the end of this review. So stay with me, let's talk about the next group of people, and this is the Ratliff family. So we've got Jason Isaac as Timothy Ratliff, Parker Posey as Victoria Ratliff, Patrick Schwarzenegger, who is Saxton Ratliff, and Sarah Catherine Hook and Sam Nivola as Piper and Lachlan. Again, in the theme of this series, where I feel nothing really happens for any of these characters unless they die, the Ratliff family doesn't really do anything. Parker Posey, I think she's been heavily praised online for her performance playing, the Texan kind of stereotypical accent, and people are finding that funny. And whilst to some degree, I think if you overham a Texan accent, it can be funny. I don't think, other than the Texan accent, I don't think Parker Posey did anything. I thought actually her character was rather bland, especially in the first few episodes. Her character was really bland and seemed over it, which she was, because her character was over being in Thailand because Victoria didn't want to be here and she thought that she was above this and wanted to go back home instantly since day one. For a show that is prestige TV, where characters are meant to have depth to them, the Ratliff family had no depth. Victoria's narrative from A to Z was, I'm a mum, I want to go home, I'm rich, and I don't want my daughter to stay in Thailand. And it ended that way. There was no character development for her whatsoever. And that's sort of the same with Saxton to some extent. I'm rich, I'm, a daddy's boy, and I'm working under daddy's company. And nothing really changes for him other than maybe some spirituality towards the end because of Chelsea, because she kind of opens up him and broadens his horizons. Piper had the most sort of depth, but not really, again, because she was this spoiled princess type of rich character, which Mike White's done to death. And she continues to be this until she stays over in the monastery with the monks. And I think here Mike White it's kind of disappointing he made Piper this rich princess character, because she was the one with virtue, right? And she was the one who was like above her family because they were just rich people and that was all they had to them. And she wanted to be more, and she wanted to have more depth to herself. And she wanted her family to be having more depth because they were quite superficial people, and she didn't want to live that life. But then she stays at the monastery, and she doesn't like the food, and she doesn't like the bed, and she doesn't like the cobwebs, and how unclean it is, and how poor everything seems. So she kind of leaves the monastery, and she's like, when Lachlan's like, oh, I want to stay with you here and join you in this year in Thailand, she's already thinking, I don't want to be here. So where you had someone in the Ratcliffe family being the polar opposite, she sort of just rejoins and becomes sponged in. And at the end, Victoria's like, if you want this purse, I'll get it for you, you deserve this purse, you're rich, I'm just glad you're coming home with us to the rich white class America. And that's all Victoria wants for her children, is to be rich and live a good life. So it is disappointing that Mike White played with the rich characters he's always got and made one of them not want that life, but then reversed it and was like, no, she wants that life, she's a rich, spoiled princess. And that's the end of Piper's development. For her character development, is very interesting. She regressed rather than progressed. Very interesting. Lachlan, I think, is the only one of the two Ratcliffes, I think, that have the most character development. That's Timothy and Lachlan, the father and son. Lachlan goes from the shy, awkward teenage boy, and thanks to Saxton, ends up not being a virgin anymore on the boat, although that was the weird incestuous story I'm talking about, but Chloe was also involved there. So, Lachlan loses virginity, becomes a man in the straight men world, and then discovers he actually is okay with living a poor life and doesn't need money, and ends up dying because he drinks the poison that Timothy did set up with his family, because Timothy wanted to kill his own family because he felt they were all spoiled except from Lachlan. So that was the irony there, that when he tried to kill his family, all the rich ones who couldn't live without money didn't drink the poison in the end because Timothy stopped them. But the one person he wanted to save ended up killing themselves briefly. I think here Mike White made a mistake, because it was almost delicious irony that Lachlan poisoned himself through his own stupidity, because who on earth looks at a dirty blender that's been sat out all night and goes, yeah, I'm going to use that to make my smoothie, wash it out, start again, grab another blender. Maybe he was like, oh, I'm going to have a little bit of a pina colada kind of protein shake, but then obviously that backfired heavily because he didn't realize he was eating poisoned nuts or seeds from the fruit. And that was a bit of a weird one, because Pam, who was, if you didn't know, was the one that took their electronics from them, their personal tour that Timothy told her to leave and never see again, and we only saw her in episode 1 and 2. But she warned them, oddly, that, oh yeah, don't eat the fruits around here because they're poisonous. But then, as a hotel chain, isn't it sort of your responsibility to go and pick up all those fruit? Because isn't that a major health and safety concern, to have poisonous fruit be all around your guests' villas and not do anything about it, to the point where Timothy does pick up the fruits knowing they're poisonous because Pam told them they were poisonous, but told him specifically where the poison was. and then he goes and replicates that himself. I mean, that's a pretty stupid design there, right? For the hotel, that they should have like cleaners come and pick up all the fruit that have fallen off and maybe take away the fruit that's poisonous, or maybe just chop the tree down and replace it with something that is harmless rather than harmful. But the point here that I was making before I sidetracked myself, I think Lachlan should have remained dead, because I just think that would have worked better, because the family would have lost something in Lachlan, and Timothy would have been responsible for that, and that would have weighed a lot more heavily on him than everybody in that family making it out. And, Timothy having the one thing he didn't want to happen all season having happened. And we'll get onto that right now. So Timothy's character is, this business guy, and he's made some bad business deals, and now they're coming to light, and he could face jail time, and his family could lose every single dollar they have. So they will be dollarless, is that a word? Or centless? I think they have cents in America, don't they? So they'd be centless and have absolutely no money to their name. Where they started off with Timothy was this happy chappy Texan guy with his happy chappy Texan wife, although she was a bit sour-faced. Then he finds his wife Xanax, or whatever it is that nulls her because she needs to be on medication. And I think they could have done more there with Victoria, the fact that she was off her medication, but she didn't seem to spiral. Or anything like that, considering she seems pretty dependent on those medications. She didn't spiral at all at any point, and she didn't have any withdrawal. What was really weird was that Timothy had withdrawal from the first time he stopped taking the pills. So considering he had no drugs ever, and he made a point of that, he takes the drugs and then he's like, that's it, I'm addicted, and I'm having the whole symptoms of withdrawal as if I've been a drug addict for years, when he hasn't been. So I didn't know how believable or plausible that was, considering it's just a Xanax or whatever she was on. At this point, he actually calls Pam back and he's like, yeah, actually, take all our phones, we don't need them. Because originally he denied Pam to take their phones and said they're not going to do that, because he needed to be on the phone for his business. And then he took everybody's phones off them for the rest of the week and hid them so he could not deal with the fact that his life was crumbling. But instead of being like a mature man who is the head of the family, being like, look, I messed up, and at least telling Saxton, who works for him, we messed up, well, I messed up through the company, and now as a result you've messed up too, instead of just coming clean, he spends the whole time fantasizing about all the different ways he's going to kill his family. So at one point he steals a gun from Gatok, and he's like, oh, I'm just going to shoot my wife in the head. Point. We see that happen 5 times, I think. It is like 4 to 5 times. Parker Posey's Victoria is in bed and he just shoots her point blank, and then his son, and then his other son, and then Piper. He just constantly has this flashback of when Victoria says, oh, we're not poor people, I could never live without money, I need money, and then Piper has the realization she's a rich princess, and Saxton says, all I've got to live for is this company, because I've not really applied myself otherwise. So he's got all these family voices echoing in his head that all of them can't live without money, so he thinks he's justified in killing his family and himself, rather than just having them deal with it as a family and be poor. So again, because there's no consequence for this family and nobody dies like Lachlan, it would have been a good consequence of Timothy to be fantasizing about killing his family, and then in the pivotal moment when they're drinking the poison, he stops them. It would have been just, and it would have been more of a good ending if Lachlan had died as punishment to Timothy for fantasizing about killing his family. Okay, the last people I want to talk about briefly before we go into the ending is Mook and Gatok. This is Lisa from Blackpink, and she did other things, and Tayame. That's the actor, he's a public figure. So they're playing Mook and Gatok, and here, it's sweet, okay? It is sweet, but it's unwarranted. And I think it's a cultural thing because, in Asia, they have the belief system that you work hard and you go up and you need to be ambitious, which means not staying in one place for too long. And if you are in a company, to progress to the higher status of that company, to earn more money, to be able to look after the family better. So that's kind of, I feel like, an inherent Asian cultural systemic belief system, where we don't really have that here in the UK. I mean, of course, people want to be ambitious and earn money, but it's not you. When you find a romantic partner in the UK, I don't believe status and power and money comes into play. It's more personality. And in Asia, I think we see this where they're almost selecting a perfect match financially to make sure they're both financially stable so they can have kids and be able to afford stuff and have a good life, and then in the end look after their parents, which is not what we do in the Western cultures either. So here Mook is looking for Gatok to be a lot more ambitious, and she mentions this a few times because they're friends and they've established that they're friends in childhood. But she doesn't see him as a viable candidate because he doesn't earn enough money and doesn't seem to have ambition. And they talk about it through the season that she was like, you should be one of Sratilla's bodyguards, that shows ambition to me, that is attractive to me, that means that I can see you as a viable candidate to date, and because you can look after me and I can look after you, or whatever. So he's not getting this message because has the belief system, he's a Buddhist. In Thailand, Buddhism is one of the practiced religions. So he's a Buddhist, which means he doesn't want to harm people, right? And he wants to detach himself from having monetary value or placing, everything into objects rather than just letting himself be and go with the flow of life and being really peaceful and meditative and a pacifist, right? Mook isn't after that. She's after someone like the bodyguards that Sritilla already has, because that to her is ambition, and that to her is stability, and that to her means safety. So all the way through the season, she's like prompting him. She's like, oh, good, you got a gun now, because he's a security guard. She's like, oh, good, you got a gun now. Oh, good, you're going to be taught how to use the gun. Oh, maybe you can do that. And he has conversations with her when he's like, I don't think I could pull a trigger on someone and kill them because that doesn't go against my belief system because I'm a pacifist and a Buddhist. And what is frustrating with Mook and Katok is they can just agree to be friends, and Mook is almost on that level where she just wants to be friends anyway, and Gatok is sort of consistently bothering her and he won't let her go. Like, he invites her on a date and she's like, as friends, and he's like, no, as more, and she's sort of like reluctant because she doesn't like him then that way, but she sort of goes along with it. And even on the date when he says that, oh, I'm a Buddhist and I don't want to hurt anyone, she's like, okay, great. And then she turns him down throughout the series about 5 or 6 times. She's constantly like, no, I don't want to be with you, no, you don't match who I'm looking for, no, we're just friends. So it's frustrating he won't pick up on that message, and his whole character narrative is constantly that, oh, I really want to be with Mook, and she's like, but I don't want to be with you, and he won't let it go, and he won't just accept friendship from her, which is rather frustrating. Been there. So, the ending, the final episode of White Lotus Season 3. Again, if you haven't already known from the spoilers, they're going you, this is spoilers, so expect spoilers. Right, I'll just break them down into the groups. So the girls, which are Laurie, Kate, and Jacqueline, they end on a good note. Aside from the fact when they're taking a selfie with Jim and Sritilla, Rick shoots Jim point blank, and then that makes all the girls shit themselves and they run, and Laurie runs like the wind, and that's been pointed out online how funny it is that Laurie's literally like, oh, and she's like off. She, as soon as the first firing thing happens, Jacqueline and Kate are sort of like, whoa, what the hell are we gonna do? And they sort of back away cautiously, but Laurie's gone straight for the hills instantly, which is hysterical. And it's now funny to rewatch. If you rewatch it, you could just see her, she's like, oh, proper hysterical, quite comedic acting there from Carrie Coon, who, as I said, delivered a beautiful monologue, and it was so lovely when she was on about how she's had the epiphany that she loves her friends. So from that to the funny comedic acting, I think Carrie Coon came out of this series rather good, and I'm glad she did not die. I'm also glad Kate and Jacqueline didn't die either, and I think it's really nice to explore that dynamic of friendship within women, and how even though they have different political views that they may not agree on, or different kinds of personality traits that they may not agree on, and whilst they do butt heads, as women, they have the maturity to put that aside and recognise their friendship, and that they still have love for each other and move on together. So whilst they might come out a bit scarred from being in a live shooting or a live shootout, they're good and they're okay. Now we've got the Ratliff children rather than the adults. Interesting, when they first join on the boat, they have the see, speak, hear no evil, right? I'll put this on the screen over here, so you can see what I'm talking about. In the end, when they leave the boat, only Lachlan has the see no evil rather than speak or hear. And in Piper, she has gone from being like, I think she's the one that has the hear no evil because she has the headphones, and then she goes from that to just being like being able to hear, because she's all like and she's like rested and she looks calm and happy, and sort of happy in herself that she is a spoiled rich girl who's going back to spoiled rich girl lifestyle. So now maybe she's was hearing evil, and that was sort of linked to her family and how she viewed her family, and she viewed her family as evil and what they said was evil. She's now all ears open, she's all ready to listen to her family, and she's gelled with them, and she's appreciating that she is now a rich girl too, and she's going to probably take advantage of that and develop into Victoria's personality, and she's fine with that. And Saxton, who went from speak no evil with the beer bottle, ends up not doing anything with the speak no evil because he's reading. But what he's reading is the books that Chelsea gave him, the spiritual ones, to try and kind of change his life. I think that ends the Ratliff's children. rather well. That they go from speak here and see no evil to accepting who they are as people, except from Lachlan looks very worse for wear because he's almost died and been poisoned. And on that note, as I said before, I think it would have been good if Lachlan stayed dead, and that would have been a repercussion for Timothy, but they chose not to, and they chose to bring him back. And of course, the end of Rick and Chelsea is their death and demise, which is rather sad. So what we've got here is Rick just found inner peace, but didn't last very long because the anger comes back when he sees Jim. And it's almost like he feels he has a second chance to finish what he wanted to start, even though he ended up only pushing him off a chair to begin with. Now he wants to finish what he started and kill him. So Chelsea really, really, really tries her best to stop him. You know, she's like, don't do it, move on, we're leaving together to be alive and to continue alive together. But to be honest, it would never have happened anyway for Chelsea because Rick isn't the type of person to do anything with his life other than play the victim and suffer. I mean, the problem is Rick wasn't told either. Again, things not being revealed. Rick wasn't told by Jim until after he killed Jim and started the shoot off that this was his dad, because Sritella tells him, oh, why did you do this? This is your own dad, you've killed your own dad. And again, it just seems pointless to do that because now you're ending up in a shootout and dragging Chelsea into it where, I don't know, Rick just ended up being a selfish jerk, really, rather than being a character that you could want to hope for, because he ended up coming back and he was all smiles, and we thought, here we go, this is what Chelsea needs, somebody now to look after her and be nice, and they can look after each other and they can be there for each other and he can move on from his trauma. Mike White, in this instance, instead of making a death that was rooted in murder and mystery, it just ended up being like Tanya, where it was tragic. Because, and I'm not talking about Rick, I couldn't care that Rick died. In fact, he deserves death, really, because he was such a whiny man who didn't do anything but cry all season, which and be rude to Chelsea, which was frustrating to watch. Again, because the character narrative for Mike White, who is good, as I keep telling myself, with narratives and character depth, for a man that's very good with that, you ended up with Rick having no progression again, you know, as Victoria is so bland and Southern woman bland, and that's all she remains being. Rick is this angry man who is angry and remains angry and then dies. There's no progression for them, and for a lot of these characters, there's no progression either. So, on the topic of Chelsea now, I think it's tragic, as Tanya was extremely tragic. It is so tragic that Chelsea is the one that dies. But it was alluded to throughout the series, okay? She kept on saying things come in threes. That was the robbery, where she was held at gunpoint, and the snake, the venomous snake that bit her after Rick, you know, let out the snakes. So when you go from robbery at gunpoint, that's putting the pieces together already for the fact she'll be fatally shot, and the cause of that being Rick. So, robbery at gunpoint, a gun, and Rick being the cause of her being bitten by the snake, Rick is the cause of her eventual death. And I think there I'll give credit to Mike White. I love that kind of narrative where things flow nicely like that and they do piece together well. But here I think it was really sad. Chelsea said, you can kind of know as well towards the end who's going to die as the episode goes out. Chelsea, I think, sealed her fate when she said to Rick that they have a more fatty, which she says embraces fate no matter what it is, good or bad, whatever will be, will be. And she says, I think we're going to be together forever, you know. And he's like, that's the plan. And then they both end up dying together in a yin and yang position at the end, because Chelsea's face down in the water because she's already dead at that point. So when she floats back up, she's that way. And Rick, who is shot and falls into the water, turns himself over, so he's face up. And everybody here in the episode died facing up, looking at the trees and the sky. And I think that lends into the Thailand season and Buddhism, because it's giving into peace and the universe and accepting things for what they are. And each of the characters look up and they kind of accept their own fate, that they're dying, and nobody tries not to die. You know, Chelsea looks up into the trees as Lachlan did when he was going to die, and Rick turns himself over in the water to look up at the trees and accept his fate and pass off peacefully. So all these characters, whilst dying in horrible ways, did pass on peacefully because they had a lovely scenery to look at, I suppose, as they went into the next part and the next phase of life. For Rick, I think the only way he was ever going to find peace was through death, because he wasn't going to be able to live happily anyway. I think also because he was told by Sritella that this was your dad, you just killed your dad, it kind of wraps him up anyway. Where else is he going to go? You know, he would have to deal with the fact that he'd be in jail, having shot his dad and killed his dad, whilst his whole life shattered in front of him because he always thought that Jim was the cause of his dad's death. Now he's killed his dad. So he had nowhere else to go other than to honestly be shot and float in water and look up at trees and die. Okay, that's the end of my review. Closing thoughts. I think, as I say, it comes full circle with Belinda, and she feels a twang of guilt on the end on the boat ride home for not helping Pornchai. And I think most of storylines are wrapped up. Gaytok does actually become Sritilla's bodyguard and ends up winning Mook over because she's a bodyguard. And that kind of closes their storyline off. Chelsea and Rick are dead, so that closes their storyline off, and the Ratliffs learn nothing, and Timothy's gonna tell his family what's up, and I guess the women, Kate, Jacqueline, and Laurie, find out that they are still good friends, and they can continue being good friends, and that kind of wraps up season 3 of The White Lotus. What did you think? If you did watch it, of course you did, otherwise you probably wouldn't be watching a review about it. Excuse me. Yeah, did you like it? Who did you think was going to die? Did you think who did die was Justin good? Or did you think that you would have wanted someone else to die? Honestly, other than the Ratliff family dying, I don't know who else they could have feasibly killed. Maybe for dramatic effect, they could have had one of the 3 women die in the shootout accidentally, and that would have been more consequence to Rick's actions, which would have been even more tragic. And maybe that would have been a good route to go down. And if you were going to do that, you would probably have to kill Jacqueline or Laurie, because Kate really didn't add much. She's just going back home to a Trump family. But yeah, that was my review of White Lotus Season 3. I am looking forward to Season 4. There's already speculation about that online if you want to go check that out. I'm not going to say it here, this is Season 3. But I shall see you in the next one. Bye.